Sex has always been part of the Silent Hill series, as a discussion point, and as a way of disturbing the player as much as possible. Another tool in the Team Silent tool belt. While the usage of the subject has varied game to game, it's always been there in the background, whether it be subtle hints and things left unsaid, or in-your-face scenes of grotesque quality. Today we'll go through and discuss the 4 original Team Silent games, and how sex is discussed in all of them. The first game is a story of parenthood, a relationship between father and daughter that doesn't originate in sexual content. Harry and his wife find Cheryl on the side of the road. They didn't create or give birth to her. In fact, she's born without any kind of sexual congress. Alessa creates her by herself, through magic. Cheryl is in a way born of a kind of divine birth. Many mythic figures are described as being born through magic in a way that doesn't involve sex, from Athena in Greek myth to the most famous, Jesus Christ. We don't know who Alessa's father is. My theory for a long time has been Dr. Kaufman. He works closely with Dahlia despite not being a member of the cult, and Dahlia isn't married or involved with anyone else. Her daughter is a tool Dahlia uses for her own ends, which includes using magic to impregnate her with God. Again, this is a pregnancy that doesn't involve sex, but it is still very much a metaphor for rape and violation. In the film adaptation, Alessa is raped, and the change fits because at its heart, the story is about Dahlia violating her daughter's body for her own uses, not caring how it hurts her. So while sex really isn't part of the main story, it's there in the background. Dahlia discusses using her daughter's womb after all. There's also hints of it with Lisa, the young woman who has been coerced through drug use into working with Kaufman. In Origins, it's implied there's a sexual relationship between them. Again, another case of someone with power over another person using their body for their own ends, with no regards for their safety or happiness. In that way, Lisa and Alessa are foils of one another, which is why I think Alessa leaves Lisa alone. In Silent Hill 2, sex is a much larger part of the main story. It's about a husband and wife and their relationship, and sex is a big part of the discussion. The illness Mary suffered has damaged their relationship, hurting both their emotional and physical intimacy. James wants that relationship back, which is part of why he represses his memory, and it's why meeting Maria is such a temptation for him. She represents what he's missing, a wife that desires him and wants to spend time with him. James isn't just missing sex. Maria, after all, resembles his wife almost perfectly. He wants Mary, and he wants to be intimate with her. He misses his wife, not just any form of sex. He wants the intimacy that comes with marriage, and the themes of the game reflect that. Puzzles act in such a way that reflect marriage and the bond between two people, specifically the hospital, where both Maria and James are required to move forward, and to do so, 2 rings have to be found. The nurses in the hospital are somewhat sexual for the time the game was made. Today I would call them tame, given the camera angles and graphics that make it easy to miss the sexual aspect. They have short skirts and tight shirts, but that's it, compared to later iterations. But most importantly, they don't have faces. They're anonymous, inhuman. When James was caring for his wife, he certainly spent a lot of time at the hospital, and that may have been the only place he saw other people, and other women. So the nurses he met may have reminded him of his physical desire, which was going unmet because of his troubles with Mary. But the nurses are faceless, because in the end it wasn't another person he desired. He wanted Mary. These bodies just reminded him of his sexuality, another sign that he's not tempted by other people or an affair, He just wants sex with his wife. Of course, we can't talk about this game without talking about Pyramid Head and his infamous actions. There are 2 rape scenes in Silent Hill 2. Both occur in the apartment levels, almost within an hour of each other. It's strange because Pyramid Head appears throughout the game, but he'll never again behave in such a manner. The apartments are a place that represent home, a place people live. Mary and James would have been physically intimate at home. Sex and home are both associated with marriage. So Pyramid Head only behaves this way at home, where James would have been sexually active. It's also strange to think about the act itself. It's been described as rape for years because it is violent and seems forced. But if you think about the town and the concept of the game, well, both Pyramid Head and the monsters he is intimate with are controlled by the town. For the rest of the game, James follows Pyramid Head's footsteps. Pyramid Head shows James the way to the hotel and to the truth. In a way, the town is trying to help him, and if he learns his lesson, he's allowed to leave. So the town ultimately doesn't mean him harm, and this scene is meant to teach him something. It's a performance, an act. Pyramid Head and the monsters are marionettes whose strings are pulled by the will of the town. But why this kind of performance? Well, for one, James's actions might be heavily influenced by repressed sexual desire, especially if you play for the darker endings. But it is also an act of violation, of acting against someone else's will. When James kills Mary, she fights back. Her will is being violated. He is killing her against her will. The rape is a metaphor for James's murder and is meant to shake him up and remind him of his sin. Where Silent Hill 2 is about desiring sex, Silent Hill 3 is about being afraid of it. Instead of a married man, we play a young teen girl. The context is entirely different. Teenagers are being introduced to sex for the first time. And in the United States, that introduction is harmful, full of misinformation and scare tactics. Teens in the US are taught to be afraid of sex and to avoid it, in spite of the fact that our media is obsessed with sex. Women are taught sex is supposed to hurt. So Heather is in that precarious age where sex is a mystery, something she has not experienced, which society tells her is bad, dangerous, and will hurt. Sex is frightening in Silent Hill 3. Most of the monsters and bosses resemble penises, twisted into something gross and dangerous. We see blood everywhere, both reflecting periods, which are the earliest form of sex education a girl receives and are very painful themselves, and reflective of the fact that sex can make women bleed if their partners are not careful, which many are not taught to be. At the heart of the story is another case of rape. Heather is pregnant against her will. Pregnancy is painful and changes the body, often permanently. Heather suffers great pains when the change to the other world happens, a reflection on period cramps or birthing contractions. Men in this game are predatory. Douglas follows Heather even when she asks him to stop, and instead of leaving, he waits for her outside the bathroom, which he thinks is probably a dead end. Of course, Heather does escape and ends up in the other world for the first time. The beginning of the game starts with a frightening encounter with a grown man. Then there's Vincent, who acts in his own best interests and hurts Heather with his words. While Douglas turns out to be good, Vincent really doesn't. But the ultimate baddie is a woman, because it's not just men that make young girls feel bad and scared of sex. Ultimately, it's Claudia who leads to Heather's impregnation and creates the danger she faces. Women in America are often as much to blame for the hateful culture of making young girls both afraid of sex and punishing them for wanting it. It's a societal and systemic problem, and Silent Hill 3 addresses the fact that everyone involved is culpable by making Claudia the main antagonist. Silent Hill 4, meanwhile, is another game that focuses more on the bonds of family and parental issues. There's still aspects of sex in the plot. We see Walter acting in sexual ways with corpses, mutilating them while seeming to gain sexual gratification. It reflects the fact that his childhood is damaged, and his mind is changed because of it. He isn't able to gain sexual gratification in a socially acceptable way. Both of the main female characters, Cynthia and Eileen, are seen in sexual lights, but the main male characters aren't very sexual at all. Cynthia hits on Henry and offers him a no-strings-attached one-night stand, and Henry is unable to even respond verbally. He's clearly uncomfortable and unsure of what to do. He probably had a difficult childhood. See my videos for my reasons for believing this. And this is reflected in the fact that he, too, can't react to sexual overtures in a mature and rational way. He seems afraid and unsure of himself, despite the fact Cynthia is obviously interested. Of course, he may just not want sex, but given the way the story is written, I think it's more likely the writers wanted to show he wasn't socially well-adjusted. Eileen starts out in a different outfit, but by the time Henry meets her, she's wearing a cocktail dress. We learn she was planning to go to a party the night before Walter attacked, showing us that she, too, is more socially adjusted than the protagonist. She has friends, she leaves her apartment, and is clearly comfortable in her sexuality given her appearance. The game is about abuse and how it damages people, and abuse can affect a person's ability to have sexual intercourse in a healthy way. Henry and Walter aren't able to do this, while Cynthia and Eileen are far more adjusted in comparison. Walter's reason for killing Cynthia relates to desire, because she is able to feel and act on it in a healthy manner, and he can't. Eileen is chosen because she is a mother figure, and a mother is definitely a sexual person at least once for pregnancy to happen. There's a lot of content and discussion about sex in this series. It's pretty big in the first few games, but becomes less important later on. Thank you for watching, and thanks to Fritz for requesting this video and donating to Patreon. If you'd like to make a video request, you can donate as well. Check out the Patreon page for details on what you can receive. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.